So there's three pretty big stories going on at the moment. We talked about Candido, we talked about the big power struggle and booking changes, and then there is the undercurrent of all that, which is the television negotiations.
Which we kind of touched on a little bit.
So TNA's contract with Fox Sports Net expires at the end of May, and TNA may choose not to renew it. As reported here 2 weeks ago, this is in the Torch, TNA management has said that they would be making a major announcement regarding its TV future this month, and WGN and Spike were the leading candidates for the new home of TNA. TNA would prefer to end up on Spike, but with FSN insisting on a 6-month contract that would lock TNA in on FSN through the end of November, preventing them from instantly switching to Spike after WWE's contract expires in October. If TNA were to reach a deal with WGN, they would end up running Monday nights, not live. Or I think what it ended up being settled on was actually the model they ran in 2010, which was live one night, taped the night after. First hour would be unopposed and the second hour would go head-to-head with Raw. WGN has almost no built-in audience relative to Spike. It's mostly, it carries a bunch of like Chicago sports in particular. It's not a particularly strong national station, even if it is available nationally. But it's a big station in Chicago because I think it had the Chicago sports. But if TNA signed with WGN, they could move to Monday nights as soon as June. TNA could also renew with FSN and bypass the jump to WGN entirely. The Spike situation appears to be up to Spike, not TNA, which is said to be intrigued but cautious about acquiring TNA to replace WWE this fall. Spike had stopped negotiations with TNA until its UFC deal was finalized and announced last week.
Spike's about to have a big old boost.
Yeah, because obviously the UFC and Ultimate Fighter, it's a huge boost to Spike. But they're losing WWE, which is a bigger outlet than both.
Oh yeah, they're trading in a surefire thing for some risky properties.
Yeah, but probably risky properties at a much lower cost.
Yeah, and one that will pay off tremendously.
So yeah, the way this dynamic is working, they want Spike. They're not sure can they get Spike, but they want Spike.
Listen, we all want Spike, okay?
They would be fine with staying on FSN until they get Spike. The issue being FSN want a minimum 6-month contract, whereas TNA wanted a month-to-month commitment. Because TNA did not want a situation where if they got Spike, they couldn't seamlessly go on Spike the week the WWE contract expired.
Which would be also great optics for them.
Yeah, because that's the way you'd want to do it, right? Because obviously WWE would have an exclusivity clause, so they couldn't go on Spike before that. But the second the WWE contract expires, that week you want to be on Spike. And the way it turns out, they actually end up putting them in the velocity slot so that it's right in the time slot of where WWE viewers would have regularly watched, which is like really smart. But that's like the seamless transition they wanted. So if they signed the 6-month contract with FSN, that would have taken them through November and taken that off the table. So that FSN contract, even though they obviously wanted to stay on TV rather than not, that's untenable. They can't do it. So FSN's gone. That's potentially TV being gone. And then the other player there is WGN, which the intriguing part of it is that if it is WGN, it would have been a Monday Night War. They would have gotten absolutely fucking slaughtered. But
yeah, I don't know why people think that's the solution to all their problems.
Because when you think about like the level of star power and TV exposure they had when they tried in 2010 was like 7 million times bigger than it was here in 2005.
I mean, it forced fucking Vince and Brett to make up.
Yeah, just to compete with it. But they're thinking here, in 05, with no stars and barely any TV exposure, they can just drop themselves on Mondays and go head-to-head with Raw, or head-to-head with at least the first hour of Raw.
Listen, I don't think they can do it. I think they hope that they can get something out of it before they move time slots again.
Apparently, as mentioned in the last episode, that's a big thing the Jarretts wanted. They wanted that Monday Night War. They thought it was the right idea. We talked about that last time. It's stupid.
There's a reason. You know, Dixie Carter right, is all I have to say.
So, yeah, Dave writes about this as if it's like close to a done thing. He's like, oh, you know, we're one step away and likely a few weeks away from having a second edition of the Monday Night Wars. And it's actually 5 years away, Dave, as it turned out.
Classic Dave Meltzer L, am I right?
Yeah, but contracts had not been signed, nor a deal verbally closed. But a final decision on TV is almost surely going to be made within a week or two. And it turns out they'd not go ahead with this. We'll talk about more in June. Obviously, we know where they end up. They end up on Spike. But
what?
The big spoiler, they end up on Spike TV. You might have heard of it.
Isn't it crazy that a little reflection here in this 1.5 hour bullshit, that we're almost at the Spike era?
Yeah, we're in May. Spike starts in October.
Out of the asylum, onto Fox Sport, and now boom, Spike. We're crushing this.
The big bet TNA had... Oh, you just mean us?
Yeah, I'm talking about us. I'm not talking about TNA.
Banging through this history of TNA?
Yeah. We're going to be up to 2023 in no time. Them things are going to get real awkward.
As I mentioned before, the main reason that we went month by month instead of like show by show or something is that like I just wanted to get through those Asylum years into like the good years of TNA as quickly as we could.
Yeah, mainly because you were worried I was going to lose interest. Then you'd have the, immeasurable task of replacing.
I'd never replace you. I'd stop the podcast without you.
Oh my god.
Liam was like, is that a promise?
Oh, okay, I have an out. Much like Jeff Jarrett as champion, I now have negotiation leverage.
Just put the NWA title on you.
Oh, if you buy me the NWA title, I'll do this forever.
So TNA's big bet is that while Spike are like, we don't actually want wrestling, TNA are like, wrestling and MMA go really well together and we think they really do want wrestling.
Hey, we just have Tito Ortiz.
So that actually might be the reason they are bringing in Tito. They'll be like, look Spike, we have some MMA guy.
Well, we always knew that like Jarrett had an interest in interacting with UFC.
He is double J, double MMA.
Like, well, yes. But like also we've seen that in previous notes. So it's like there was clearly always... He thought there was potential for crossover. UFC even considered it at one point, I believe, but then we're like, no. So that's always been kind of an idea, and we got a little taste of it, and we get a bit more. MMA and TNA have kind of always had hands in each other's pockets.
Well, yeah, because we talk about Spike and MMA and TNA, we'll get to it far down the line at this stage, but where TNA becomes essentially like the marketing vehicle for Bellator at first.
Yeah, I remember that's where I first heard of Bellator.